Billy always loved mysteries. He was the kind of kid who would rather spend his afternoons exploring the unknown than playing video games or watching TV. Not the kind in books, but real ones. He had a knack for finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Hidden treasures, secret passages, things like that. His imagination turned every creak and shadow into a clue waiting to be discovered. So, when he found a dusty bottle hidden in his attic, his heart thumped like a drum solo. It was as if he had stumbled upon a secret meant just for him. The bottle was old, covered in cobwebs, with a faded label that read, Wolf's Bane Elixir. The name alone sent shivers down his spine. Billy giggled. What a funny name. He wondered what kind of potion it could be. He uncorked the bottle. A strange, sweet smell wafted out, making him dizzy. It was unlike anything he had ever smelled before. He knew he shouldn't. But curiosity got the better of him. But the potion shimmered in the dim attic light. It seemed to glow with a life of its own, beckoning him closer. It called to him. One sip, he thought, just a tiny sip. What harm could it do? The liquid tasted like candy and fire. It was sweet and spicy, a combination that both delighted and alarmed him. It burned going down, sending a shiver through Billy's body. He felt a strange warmth spreading from his throat to his toes. He coughed, his eyes watering. What had he done? Panic started to set in. He stumbled back, suddenly very tired. His limbs felt heavy and his vision blurred. He collapsed onto his bed, the bottle slipping from his grasp. His eyelids grew heavier with each passing second. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was the full moon shining through his window. It cast an eerie glow over his room, making everything look magical and mysterious. A strange itching woke Billy. It was all over his body, an unbearable sensation that seemed to come from deep within his skin. He scratched and scratched, but it wouldn't stop. The more he scratched, the worse it got, as if his skin was alive and rebelling against him. He stumbled to the mirror and gasped. His heart pounded in his chest as he saw his reflection. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't him. Not quite. It was like looking at a distorted version of himself. Something was terribly wrong. His skin seemed tighter, hairier. It was as if his body was transforming into something else, something unrecognizable. Where his reflection should have been a 10-year-old boy, something else was emerging. Something wilder, more primal. His bones ached, his muscles spasmed uncontrollably. It felt like his entire body was being reshaped by an invisible force. He felt like he was being stretched from the inside out. Panic seized him, his mind racing with fear and confusion. He tried to scream, but only a strangled cry escaped his throat. His voice was changing, becoming more guttural and raw. What was happening to him? His thoughts were a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, which seemed bigger, heavier. His balance was off, everything felt wrong. Claws, sharp as knives, ripped through his skin. His hands were no longer his own. They were becoming something monstrous. He cried out in pain, a primal, guttural sound. It was a scream that echoed through the room, filled with agony and fear. The transformation was relentless, an unstoppable force that took over his entire being. Brown fur sprouted, covering his body like a living carpet, each hair growing with a life of its own. His teeth lengthened into sharp fangs, glistening under the moonlight, ready to tear through anything. His nose pushed forward, becoming a wet, black snout, sensitive to every scent in the air. The world around him seemed different too. Smells, once unnoticed, assaulted him with their intensity. He could hear the scuttling of mice in the walls, the distant barking of dogs, and even the rustling of leaves outside. His senses were heightened, sharper than ever before, making him acutely aware of his surroundings. The full moon hung high in the sky, bathing the room in its eerie glow, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. He felt strangely drawn to it, a primal pull he couldn't explain, as if the moon was calling out to him. His fear was fading, replaced by something else. Excitement, power, a sense of invincibility, he wasn't sure. But one thing was clear, Billy was gone, replaced by something far more primal. In his place stood a creature of the night, a werewolf, ready to embrace the darkness. Section 4, Embracing the Beast. Terror gave way to curiosity. He examined his reflection, this time not with fear but with a strange fascination. His eyes, once brown, now glowed with an eerie red light. He bared his fangs, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He looked powerful. His new body moved with a grace and speed he'd never known. He raced around his room, leaping over furniture, his claws leaving deep gouges in the wooden floor. He felt free, unburdened. The world seemed full of possibilities. He let out a howl, a long, mournful sound that echoed in the night. Section 5. A new reflection. He stared at the moon, its light beckoning him. He knew he had to get outside. He had to run. He smashed the window with a swipe of his paw, shards of glass raining down harmlessly around him. The night air was cool and crisp on his fur. He took off running, feeling the wind whip through his hair, the ground flying beneath his paws. He had never felt so alive. Section 6. Howling at the Moon. Billy the boy was gone. In his place stood a creature of the night, a being of instinct and power. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in his life, Billy wasn't afraid. He was a werewolf, and he was home, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, "What about the morning?" The full moon continued to shine, bathing the werewolf in its eerie light. And as Billy howled at the moon, a single thought echoed in his mind. This was only the beginning.